Hello? The end of summer between the two summits seemed rather quiet and calm. But credit must be given to the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, who, in his interview with the Chinese agency Xinhua, really stirred things up quite a bit. Let me quote. This is the last paragraph from that interview, taken from the Kremlin.ru website. Together with our Chinese friends, we advocate for the reform of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. We are united in the belief that the new financial system should be built on the principles of openness and genuine fairness, ensuring equal and non-discriminatory access to its instruments for all countries without exception, and reflecting the real standing of member countries in the global economy. It is important to prevent the use of the financial sector for neocolonial purposes that contradict the fundamental interests of the global majority. On the contrary, we need progress for the benefit of all humanity. I am confident that Russia and China will continue to work together to achieve this noble goal, joining efforts for the prosperity of our great peoples. I will now translate into Russian. Guys, your Bretton Woods system in its Reagan-era version has worn everyone out. And China and I have already agreed that we will discuss this topic during negotiations. This is a fundamentally important signal. To whom? Well, to those who currently control this very Bretton Woods system and are its beneficiaries. In other words, the Euro-Atlantic elites. And here, a whole bunch of nuances immediately come up. First of all, what is the fight between Trump's team and the Euro-Atlanticists really about? The fight is over who will be the leader of this Euro-Atlantic community. Despite my warning on November 5th, 2014, in Dayton, Ohio, at the Dartmouth conference, Trump didn't understand that his plan to make America great again wouldn't work without dismantling the global dollar system, that is, the Bretton Woods model. That's why he's not fighting to dismantle it now, even though he was warned by some of his former advisors, for example, Steve Bannon, who says you can't make anything work with this mess. But right now, he's a bit removed from the White House. So, Trump is fighting for control over the Federal Reserve. In other words, not to destroy the global dollar system, but to become its main beneficiary. The whole story with Cook is directly related to this. And here's a very interesting point. So, the essential thing is, Cook explicitly refers to American law, according to which the appointed heads of the Federal Reserve are not subject to any administrative control whatsoever. And LT, break time equals 0.5s / and GT. Trump believes that Cook committed mortgage fraud, and for this reason, in theory, she should step down because it's not right for someone who committed mortgage fraud to be in charge of the finances of the whole country, and in fact, the entire world. Cook responds to this by saying, "Guys, this isn't fraud, and the court will prove it." But the way things turn out, at first I wanted one thing, and then circumstances changed, but I just forgot to let anyone know. But this whole forgot to let anyone know thing most likely doesn't fall under criminal charges, but rather, at best, is considered an administrative offense. But from a reputational standpoint, Cook definitely has some serious problems. And by the way, I'm still waiting for the moment when it'll be announced. I didn't mention her background for nothing. When someone will say this is an example of Trump-style racism, or maybe someone else will, or maybe someone already has, but we just don't know about it yet. So here's what I want to say. This has absolutely nothing to do with racism. It's purely an administrative power struggle. Right now, every member of the Fed's board is being scrutinized under a magnifying glass, and Cook herself slipped up. All in all, she understands this, but apparently she's going to fight to the end. This is crucial because in less than 3 weeks there will be a meeting of the Federal Open Market Committee, where she is a voting member. Oh, and by the way, I wrote about this in the macroeconomic review for the Khazin Fund, which came out this morning. But that's not the main point right now. The main thing is that Trump, in his bid to seize control over the Fed, is taking actions that are dangerous for the dollar system. In particular, the law on stablecoins, which essentially legalized alternative issuance. And there's more to it as well. In this critical situation, the representatives of the Euro-Atlantic elites simply can't help but fully understand that agreements between Putin and Xi could potentially have truly irreversible consequences for them. And LT, break time equals 0.5s/NGT. Let me make a small digression here and say right away, in reality, it doesn't matter who wins, the current Euro-Atlantic elites or Trump. Because the US economy is no longer sufficient to support this whole Bretton Woods machine. It's going to collapse anyway. But it's impossible to explain this to people who were born and raised within this system, who sincerely believe that nothing else could exist. That's why they will continue to stick to their course. If Trump had really wanted to destroy the dollar system, he could have already done it. And then investments in the American economy would have gone into the real sector. But right now, they're going into a bubble on the financial markets connected to artificial intelligence. Moving on. In this situation, it's absolutely clear that Putin's interview is a signal to the Euro-Atlantic elites. Guys, you've gone too far with your sanctions, with your Ukraine, and so on and so forth. And if you want us not to start destroying your system ourselves, then in that case, stop it. The summit in Beijing will be in 3 days. That's why there's nothing they can do anymore. I think the main signal they can send is to give the central bank leadership the green light to sharply lower the interest rate. I suspect that if Putin and Xi don't declare war, and I think there won't be any public declaration, then in September we might see the interest rate drop all the way down to around 12 or even 11% as a demonstration to the Euro-Atlantic elite that yes, we agree, just please don't try to bring us down right now, because it might turn out, maybe you won't bring us down, but in their view. In the view of Putin and Xi, they definitely will. The only question is when? But please, let's not rush things. But right now, a signal is needed before the summit begins. The Eurasian elite has 3 days. And this, I think, is the most interesting thing to watch for. Right after I wrote this text, news came in that the well-known Banderite Parabi was killed in Lviv. And right away, of course, the question arose, is this a signal? But from the perspective of, well, Russia and the world, Parabi is a minor and unremarkable figure, but he is important within the internal Ukrainian dynamics, especially in the context of the idea of removing Zelensky. And this could be a signal from Zelensky to some of his competitors, like, guys, watch out! Or it could be the result of complicated relations with Poland over the Volhynia massacre, because Paraby was known as, well, a Poland hater. And in this sense, negotiating with Poland would be, well, easier if this person wasn't around. I'm not going to get further into this because, well, I'm neither an expert on Ukrainian elites, nor on Ukraine's relations with Poland, nor on how things are set up in Lviv, or who could have organized this. And honestly, it's not that interesting. What's important is something else. Most likely in the next 3 days, we'll get a serious signal from the Euro-Atlanticists, not from Trump, but from the Euro-Atlanticists. That will indicate they're ready to make concessions if Russia, together with China, don't move to sharply tighten things in regard to the global economic settlement system. To me, this seems like the most interesting point in these last days of summer before the summit. I'm not going to say anything right now about what exactly Putin and she might do. I've written about this partly in a private channel, but honestly, they have a lot of options, and some very interesting ones at that. But as for what they might not do, well, that depends on how convincing the signals from the Euro-Atlantic elites will be. We'll see. So I think this is the most interesting aspect that will accompany the summit and the first days after it. But the first signal, I'll say it again, should come before the summit. If it doesn't happen, that means it's an invitation for Putin and Xi to act as tough as possible. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.